I was almost murdered when I was 8 years old, I think. Tell me you're from the Midwest without telling me you're from the Midwest. The click of a lighter snapped me back to reality, and I suddenly felt the spatter of rain on my face again. A cloud of foul, roll-up smoke drifted across the street. "Huh?" I said, eyes darting to the left. My neighbor gazed at me from her balcony, eyes hooded. "Thunderstorms," she said, inhaling again. "You can always tell when we get them out here. Everybody who's actually from Seattle stays inside, but if you come from somewhere else, you're outside staring as soon as the first flash of lightning hits." "I'm from Iowa." "Where are you from?" "Indiana," I answered, as the sky lit up with another bright flash. "Southern Indiana." I took a deep pull from my bottle of wine. "I knew it," she said, soft smoke pouring from her smile. "We all love the rain, the real rain, not the mist you usually get out here." "I wouldn't say I love it. I just feel compelled to watch it." "Or that," she agreed. "We feel connected to thunderstorms, though, in a way that people from here don't." I couldn't disagree. I certainly felt connected to thunderstorms, though I wouldn't say I missed them. One of the many reasons I found myself here, so very far from the forests and creek bottoms of home, had been how infrequent real rainstorms used to be before climate change started ramping up. But they did draw me out every time the sky crashed white and angry. After all, a thunderstorm had made me what I am today. I couldn't say that that was a positive thing. We stood in silence as the sky shuddered and crashed around us. Her smoke drifted slowly across my vision, and I sank back into the past. August 8th, 1988, Bloomington Herald, telephone. Authorities are seeking information in connection with the death of 6-year-old Jeremy Schaffer, discovered on Sunday morning by the railroad tracks just outside city limits. Police say the boy was tied up and tortured for hours before his throat was slashed, and he was left to bleed to death alone in the woods. "I've never seen anything like it," reported Officer Joel Clark, his hand pressed to his stomach. "He was just a little kid. That anybody could do this to an innocent little boy. There's no explanation for this." Law enforcement is at a loss to explain the shocking scene. Local reporters were kept at a distance while police investigated, far behind the yellow crime scene tape, which now surrounds the railway bridge to the south of town. Any citizen with information that might lead to an arrest in this case is encouraged to come forth. The police have set up an anonymous tip line at 812-555-XXXX. For now, law enforcement remains baffled. I was 8 years old that summer, still small enough to be entirely helpless, just big enough to begin to become aware of the fact. I was an only child and a lonely child because I was strange. I read too many books, used too many big words. I brought my stuffed cat, Kitty, to school with me. I was meat for the beast of the great social mill that grinds us all down, over time, into well-shaped little cogs for the vast machine of society. I didn't understand how to be anything else, and it wasn't in any of the other children's interest to help me. So as I trundled along the railroad tracks that afternoon, on my way home from school, my first instinct wasn't exactly excitement when I heard my name shouted from just up ahead. "Jackie! Hey, Jackie!" My stick-skinny little shoulders tensed. It sounded like Jessica, or maybe Casey, girls a whole grade ahead of me. Whoever it was, I didn't think they had my best interests at heart. I hung my head and tried to ignore it, to walk by in silence. Maybe they'd let me go. I'd just gotten a new pair of glasses a month ago, and my parents would get angry if they had to pay for new ones. I stared at my cheap Velcro sneakers and plodded on, one foot after the other. "Please just let me pass." "Jackie, we know you can hear us. Come down here. We have something to show you." That voice I recognized. That voice belonged to Dustin, my longtime tormentor. I sighed, knowing there was no escape now, and turned my eyes to meet his. His gap-toothed grin stretched wide as he beckoned me down the steep hill. "Come on," he said. "Quick, we found something really cool. You're going to want to see this." And despite the fact that I knew I wasn't, that anything the older children wanted to show me was likely to result in scuffed jeans and shredded skin at best, I went. I had by now already learned my place, and besides, I couldn't run away through my childhood asthma. Maybe it wouldn't hurt too much this time, and I was already learning to go away in my head when it hurt too much anyway. Slow and unwilling, I shuffled down the slope. Kevin and Casey and Mariah and Clint stepped out of the trees to meet me, grinning like sharks. "Hurry up," said Kevin. "We have to show you this." I reached the bottom of the hill and stopped, still some 6 yards away. There was something sharp in Casey's smile, a glimmer in Mariah's green eyes that cut through my childish resignation and struck a genuine alarm bell. "My mum and dad are waiting for me," I told them. "They know I was coming this way and they'll be mad if I'm late." My voice quavered, and I quietly cursed the cowardice that had brought me this close. My mother and father didn't care where I was. They were both at work, and they wouldn't start searching until long after dark if I didn't come home that afternoon. But I finished the attempt anyway, in desperate hope. They're probably already looking. They'll probably be here any minute. "It's this way," said Dustin, ignoring my attempts at a graceful, safe exit. "Come on, you're going to want to see this." As he turned back toward the woods, the other four swarmed out to circle me, to drive me like sheepdogs, still grinning their pink grins, 12 or so permanent teeth between them. I knew when I was beaten. I followed Dustin into the dim green tunnel of the tree line. We started down a deer trail, the hungry pack nipping at my heels. No one spoke. We all knew we were beyond words now. I was theirs to do with as they would, and all I could do was hope it wouldn't end too badly. After what felt like an hour, but couldn't have been nearly so long, Dustin said, "It's this way," and gripped my wrist, leading me off to the side. It was dark this far into the trees, even in the summer slant of late afternoon. The hills rose brown around us, and the railway had swooped back to meet our path. A trestle hung far above, the bridge casting angular shadows over our faces. Dustin led me into a shallow cave, cool and dripping. "It's back here." I followed, step by unwilling step, shoes sinking into the thick cave mud as we left the light behind us. The earth sloped upward beneath my feet, and I slipped. Dustin tightened his grip on my forearm. Almost there. And suddenly, inexplicably, there were stairs and Dustin was pulling me up them into the darkness. We entered a chamber carved out of the rock. It was dim, lit only by thin greyness that filtered in from a vine-choked grating far overhead. I gazed up helplessly, and I saw that the sky boiled with clouds. A light rain began to patter down on us as Dustin drew me to the center of the room. I saw that someone had dragged an old metal chair there, and I saw a coil of rope laying on the ground. Dustin smiled, the faded light glinting off his broad incisors. I heard Casey cough behind me. It almost sounded uncertain. "Pretty cool, huh?" Dustin's voice was low, hypnotic. "We thought you would like it." I glanced around me at the other children, eyes wide and rolling with fear. They kept to the shadows at the edges of the room, unsure. I thought I saw a question in Mariah's eyes as she shot a look toward Kevin, who moved back half a step. My labored breathing was the only sound besides the tapping of sullen, slow rain for a moment. But no one would meet my eyes. I drew in a breath. I didn't know what I'd say, I only knew that this had gone very, very bad. The air hung heavy in the cavern. Dustin spoke before I could, something harsh in his voice beyond what any 9-year-old should have been able to manage. It sounded like hunger. It sounded like the hunt. It sounded like the end of the world. "Why don't you sit down, Jackie?" he whispered. And the sky opened up. A blast of lightning and a burst of thunder hit at the same moment, knocking all of us to the ground. I rubbed my wrist where Dustin had gripped it white and backed away, slowly at first, then faster. The rain poured down through the grating above, and no one else moved as I pushed myself against the wall. "I'm going home," I announced, and cursed myself silently. My voice was small and shaky, far from the defiance I'd hoped to project. I knew one of them was going to stop me at any second. But I turned and I ran down the stairs and out of that cursed cavern. And none of them followed me. None of them ever came after me as I fled through the shattering sky and the battering rain. 2 days later, Jeremy Schaffer's body was found in that chamber, twined in the ropes I'd so narrowly escaped. I didn't know him, of course. What business would an 8-year-old have with a 6-year-old? But none of us were allowed to walk home along the railroad tracks for the rest of the year. I went back once, long after the crime scene tape was gone, chewed up by years of southern Indiana wind and winters. Older, still alone, and now without the stuffed cat who waited at home on my bed. I'd learned, by then. I'd learned many things, most of them ugly. I was 16 and in high school. Dustin had moved on to tormenting other, smaller children after I grew 6 inches over one summer break. I was still gawky and weak, but I didn't present as enticing a target anymore. Among other ugly things, I'd learned to live with the fact that other children still did, just as long as I wasn't among them. The air was stifling in the cavern, still in the golden afternoon. Water dripped somewhere in the background, drawing slow stalactites down from the ceiling, grates high above. Nothing else moved. The chair was long gone, dragged off for crime scene research in some faraway police lab. All that remained were graffiti and beer cans, proof that even the darkest days gone by couldn't stop bored kids from finding a place to party. I didn't really know why I'd come. I only knew that the place had haunted my dreams for years, and I'd finally felt compelled to come back, to seek clues, to look for answers the adult world hadn't been able to find. I couldn't say. I poked in the debris with a handy stick, overturning snack wrappers and shreds of old newspaper. There was nothing here, only emptiness and the echoes of a dead child's last screams. I shivered as night came down over the woods outside. It was time to leave. As I made my way slowly down the slippery staircase, I heard a sharp intake of breath behind me. I whirled, peering back into the shadows, but nothing moved. Still, I wasn't willing to turn my back on the cavern. My eyes scoured the dimness as I backed away, one careful step at a time until my feet found solid ground. Then I turned and dashed off into the encroaching night. 2 days later, another child was reported missing. I didn't follow the story that time. It had nothing to do with me. Not everyone did, but I got out. My weak frame housed a decent mind, and I slaved away at college application essays until I arrived at a decent scholarship to a university far away from my hometown. I wasn't sorry to leave. Unfortunate as it is to report, I didn't miss my family much, and I'm afraid they didn't miss me either. I stayed on campus for my first winter break working a meaningless facilities job to feed my scholarship, and that set the sequence of my college years. I stayed away and nobody really minded. I made friends, dated a few people, some more seriously than others. I set up my own life far away from the Indiana bottomlands. It wasn't until years later, when my stepfather reached an extreme in his lengthy process of dying of lung cancer, that I returned for more than a long weekend. Bloomington had changed considerably during my absence. The town had stretched westward, and swallowed up a considerable portion of the woods I once spent time in. Downtown had edged nervously out of the comfortable hippie territory it had occupied for decades and blossomed into Starbucks and Chipotles, and it had developed a second strip of ethnic restaurants alongside the college campus. The newspaper had changed its name from the Herald Telephone to the Herald Times. There were vegan cafes. Progress was everywhere. But some things hadn't changed. I ran into Mariah at Kilroy's one night, and we sank into the uneasy communion of former classmates who hadn't really liked each other much, but who were both tipsy enough to ignore that for the sake of a couple of comfortable shots. "Remember Kevin?" she giggled, several drinks in. "He married Melissa Britton, of all people. They have 3 kids now, can you believe it?" 3? How? Were they triplets? At age 24, 3 children seemed like an excess. No, just one after another. 2 boys and 1 girl. I guess they still get along pretty well then? Mariah guffawed, and I consciously held myself back from wincing. It really hadn't been that good a joke. But the bartender placed 2 more shots of whiskey in front of us, and I gamely carried on. And remember Emily Lawrence? We always thought she and Jacob would be together forever, but she ended up marrying Joe Walsh. I did not in fact remember any of those people, and suspected that at this point Mariah had forgotten that we'd never been friends to begin with. But I smiled politely and slugged my Jim Beam. "And Mary and Katie turned out to be lesbians," she whispered, wide-eyed, upending her own shot into her beer. "I mean, we always knew they were both kind of weird, but I never expected that." I remembered again why I'd left and signaled the bartender for another drink. "Whatever happened to Dustin?" I asked, as casual as possible, tracking her movements closely. She froze, only briefly, before she pulled a compact out of her purse and began checking her makeup. A long moment passed before she responded. "Dustin's still around," she said. "He got a job at Cook. I haven't really talked to him for a while." She put her powder away and flicked her eyes toward the door. "Oh my God, is that Ashley?" she shrilled and waved her hands. "Girl, get over here. You'll never believe who's back in town." It was a long and pointless night, and, drunk as I was by the end, I found myself unable to sleep by the time I settled into my hotel bed. I picked my way randomly around the internet for a while, checking on headlines and social media, until I found myself hovering over a search box containing the words Bloomington, Indiana disappearances. I didn't want to know, but I went ahead and clicked. Behind the high-profile disappearance of a college girl a couple of years before, I found exactly what I'd expected. 7 children over 16 years, each murder more vicious than the last. Authorities stumped, no evidence besides the poor, fragile corpses. Nothing to hang an investigation on. I closed my laptop and sank into a profoundly dissatisfied sleep, full of dripping grey light and cold caverns under the train tracks. It's been 20 years and 8 more murders. I check, occasionally, even now, from 1,000 miles away. Every so often a hum starts in my brain, and it swells until I can't avoid entering the old question into Google again. The thing is, I don't actually know anything at all. I don't know whether I was really meant to be the first child to go all those years ago. I haven't seen Dustin since he slouched out of high school for the last time the year before I graduated. I don't know what he really was. He might only ever have been a baby bully who only loomed large in my own tiny head. He might never have done anything at all. But when the storm clouds crackle, I can't help but wonder. When the air sizzles with ozone, the uncertainty comes surging back. If I hadn't managed to clumsily run away that day, would Jeremy Schaffer have made it through the night? And would that have been better? What might he have become if we traded places? Would he have been more than a socially awkward IT worker? Would he have changed the world? Because I certainly never have. I Google Dustin too, I never find much. He's still alive, still in Bloomington, still working a factory job. He got married a few years ago for the 3rd time. I wonder whether she's happy, whether she's safe, whether she's scarred. I wonder so many things. In a way, I'll never get to leave that cavern under the railroad track. Not until I die, or until whoever is stealing the children of my hometown is dragged struggling into the light. It was so small a thing what happened that afternoon. I may have been safe the whole time. Or maybe I escaped by the narrowest of margins. I'll never know, because there's fundamentally nothing to report. A child who pulls the wings off of flies and stomps frogs in the creek could be a vicious murderer, or he could be a small victim himself. All I know is that a shadow set up housekeeping inside my skull that day, and it's never going away. And I might know who's killing children in Bloomington, Indiana. And then again, I might not. And there's nothing I can do about it either way. I wish I had an ending for you. I wish I had a dramatic climax to share, where I tracked down the murderer, hid in the rain, saved a small child from a grisly demise. But all I have is the whisper of suspicion and the overwhelming consciousness of the burden of proof. All I have is my own cowardice, thrown into sharp relief that summer day so long ago. All I have are all the years since, grey days one after another, knowing I made it out and Jeremy Schaffer never did. And most days, that's enough. But when the thunder boils up through the sky, I remember, and I question. And mostly, I know that there's nothing at all to report.